All right, we just got news that Iran shipped 400 ballistic missiles to Russia to be used during their ongoing war in Ukraine. There's a couple different ways to interpret that. We'll dig into a few of them. We've got 3 suspicious deaths that happened in or linked to Russia in the last week alone. Some crazy drone footage of a Ukrainian FPV drone, it's like straight out of a video game, flying into a building to destroy Russian equipment. And then an interesting poll where a surprising number of American citizens are interested in taking U.S. military action against Russia. It's a lot to get into, so I'm glad you're here. I'm recording this at 9 a.m. Central on Thursday, February 22nd, 2024. So according to a report in Reuters, where they cite 3 unnamed Iranian sources, they say that Iran has provided Russia with around 400 missiles, most likely the Fatah 110. They say some of these missiles that Iran delivered to Russia have an estimated range of 300 to 700 kilometers. An Iranian official, who, like the other sources, asked not to be identified, said that there had been at least 4 shipments of missiles, and there could be more in the coming weeks, but declined to provide further details. Imagine that, somebody declining to provide details of military arms shipments around the world. Another senior Iranian official said that some of the missiles were sent to Russia by ship via the Caspian Sea, while others were transported by plane. Couple quick notes here. This is not as sensitive as like the Iranians sending weapons to the Houthis. I've seen that argument before. The Houthis, there's an arms embargo, a UN-mandated arms embargo around Yemen. So nobody should be sending any weapons at all there, which is why the Iranians are smuggling weapons into Yemen. Iran and Russia exchanging weapons like this, like a Fatah 110, there's nothing illegal about that. They can just do that. They can just sell those and ship them whatever they want. Either way, you still don't want to necessarily announce the times, locations, and methods that those weapons are being moved. Now, a couple ways to look into this. It's going to be, the first takeaway, and I think this should be clear at this point, but in case it's not, it's going to be very, very hard to defeat Russia in terms of quantity of munitions. I think that conversation tends to come up when we see the volume of fires being used all across the front, but it's been 2 years, and that's been a very hard nut to crack. The Russian domestic production has ramped up quite a bit in terms of producing their own artillery, rockets, mortars, missiles, and drones. And they have been able to leverage relationships with their allies, places like North Korea and Iran, to either fill gaps when those appear or to supplement their already existing production. Now, we could use this news to speculate that Russian missile stocks are lower than expected, which isn't that crazy of a thing to say. To say Russia has used more missiles than they would have hoped in Ukraine makes sense. There's very few scenarios where Russia would have expected to expend this volume of munitions in this war. It's a lot. So I think it's safe to say that their missile stocks are lower than expected, but let's please not go back down the route of saying that Russia is on the verge of running out of any type of munition. People started talking about how Russia was almost out of missiles, and here we are 2 years later. They've clearly still got a fair amount. So from Iran's side, there are a couple different ways to interpret this, depending on, given the ongoing war in Gaza and Iran's involvement in multiple hotspots across the Middle East. One way to look at this is that because they're giving up weapons, right? That's notable. And here we are talking about the possibility of a war escalating across the Middle East. Iran would be right at the heart of that, and now they're giving up 400 missiles. That's an interesting move. So one way to look at this is that Iran does not think that things will escalate any further, which means that they're fine giving Russia missiles that otherwise they could have used themselves, or they could have shipped to their proxies, the Houthis down in Yemen, Hezbollah in Lebanon, or a variety of proxies, militias across Iraq and Syria. That seems really risky. The more likely scenario here, and this kind of goes down a rabbit hole, so bear with me, I'll try to stop just short. That argument is that we don't know what Russia offered for these missiles. Could have just been cash. Could have been some sort of other technology or military equipment that allows Iran to better deter the United States or Israel against an attack into Iranian territory. If you're going to be giving up missiles in this case, and Iran is constantly talking about the possibility that this war could escalate even further, is it cash that they need right now? Or is it some sort of additional military capability to stop any possibility of Israeli or U.S. jets flying overhead? I just want to throw that out there. Now, it wouldn't be, and I'm getting real close to some dangerous speculation, so I want to, couch this as much as possible. That technology would not be a new air defense system or two, right? you start to have the back of mind, wondering about nuclear technology. Just given that relationship, given the concerns about Iran in the past, and given how things have escalated across the Middle East, total speculation at this point. Don't take that as gospel by a long shot, but it's something in the back of mind. If Iran is giving up missiles right now, as Israel is increasing attacks in Lebanon, in Syria, against IRGC targets, they got something for that. Certainly worth keeping an eye on. Then over the course of the last week, we've got 3 suspicious deaths, either in or linked to Russia. The first one here, Maxim Kuzminov, was a Russian pilot who defected to Ukraine with his helicopter last year. He was found dead in an underground garage in Spain last week. His body was supposedly riddled with bullets. The Russian Foreign Intelligence, no official statements out of Russia, for what it's worth, or no claims of responsibility is a better way to say it. The Russian Foreign Intelligence Director would not directly comment, but he told reporters previously that the defector had become, quote, a moral corpse the moment he began planning his dirty and terrible crime. And there were a lot of as you can imagine, a lot of pretty negative comments about this guy the minute it was found out that he had defected. And then a Spanish news agency reported that Kuzminov's body was found on February 13th, and he had been living in Spain with a Ukrainian passport and an alternative name. So the speculation here, and that has not yet been proved, but the speculation is that he was killed, assassinated by Russia for turning over this helicopter and defecting to Ukraine. That's the speculation. Of course, with any of these things, you wait for definitive proof. And it's going to get even murkier here with this next one. Alexei Navalny, Russia's top opposition leader and Vladimir Putin's kind of fiercest foe as of late, died in prison mysteriously this last Friday. That's according to the Federal Penitentiary Service of Russia. Navalny was serving a 19-year sentence on charges of extremism. And Russia says that he felt unwell and collapsed. They brought doctors in immediately, but were unable to do anything about it. There's a lot of speculation circulating this one right now. But again, we'll say it's a surprising death, a suspicious death. Now, this guy wasn't anywhere near Putin's approval ratings. While he might have been considered kind of the top opposition leader, it's not as though it was like 49% for him, 51% for Putin. He was significantly back by any reasonable measure. But it's notable. Anytime a political opponent dies, gotta take note of that. So I imagine we'll hear more about Navalny's death, or hopefully we hear more about Navalny's death before too long. And then the last one here, we just got news, I think it was 2 days ago, that Russian military blogger Mers, his full name is Andrei Morozov, committed suicide, killed himself. He made a post on his channel, we'll read through some of it here on Telegram, 2 hours after he was forced to remove a post about Russian casualties at Avdiivka. This is a post that we talked about in a previous video where he said that the Battle of Avdiivka, taking of Avdiivka, cost 16,000 Russian dead and as many as 300 armored vehicle losses. He came under a lot of scrutiny for that. People inside of Russia were very upset. He was getting trolled across Telegram for those statements, not with people saying that they were inaccurate, but more saying that the information should not be put out there. Now, on his Telegram channel, his suicide note, if you will, he said, "Russia is my home, captured by enemies. Helpful ass lickers of the bosses, generals who are ready to sacrifice thousands of soldiers just to distinguish themselves, journalists who build their careers on lies from the screen. Go back to your businesses and kill Ukrainian Nazis as efficiently as possible with minimal losses." So Mers, 100% on board with Russia's war in Ukraine, wanted Russia to be successful in Ukraine, and has recently come out talking about the substantial losses that Russia has suffered in some of these campaigns. And then, again, I guess the official word right now is that he killed himself. We'll wait for more information there. But again, you've got kind of 3 people in the span of a week that have done something against Russia, or are viewed as enemies of the state in one way, shape, or form, and 3 of them quickly gone. All right, so then we got this pretty wild drone footage. You can see it's a Ukrainian FPV, first-person view drone, some kind of warhead strapped to it, just going right inside of a warehouse where this Russian military equipment is holed up. So it's just crazy to see how the drone innovation has happened throughout this war. It used to be that just, parking inside like this would pretty well protect you. You wouldn't know. Here's another view. I think what happened, I think this might be the same facility. And the first drone, yeah, you can see a couple different angles coming in to hit different vehicles here. Earlier in the war, these would have been relatively safe because you couldn't see them. And that's just no longer the case, right? Yeah, there's the aftermath of all of these drones striking those trucks inside of the building. It's like the level of control that these drone operators have is insane. I mean, you see them flying through these big open bays, but how long until they're able to fly into an open door, right? Or through an open window? It's wild. Kind of how quickly drones have been able to significantly shape the battlefield. We'll let the rest of this play out here. I think there's a couple different views showing the damage that these drones caused. So anyways, again, it's like a video game is what that feels like, right? That doesn't seem like we should be able to do that in real life, but that is how these drones are being used in Ukraine right now. Then turning to some interesting poll data that came out relatively recently. This was a YouGov survey conducted between January 31st and February 4th of 1,000 U.S. adult citizens. And there were a couple questions here that I thought were worth diving into. I want to set the stage with the first one here, where I'm going not in the order of the survey, but I thought this helped kind of frame everything. They said, who do you want to win the war? 72% said Ukraine, 4% said Russia. I wanted to bring that one up first because I think, especially as there's a lot of debates around continued U.S. aid to Ukraine, I think a lot of times it's being framed as you're either for Ukraine or you're for Russia. And I think what this statistic here shows is that there's a large percentage of people in the United States that would like to see Ukraine win, but might not be in favor of the way that we're going about supporting Ukraine. Right? So 4% of respondents actually want Russia to win. So next time you see somebody pushing back on the methods or the means that the U.S. is involved in this conflict or the way that we're supporting Ukraine, keep that in mind. That is just 4%, according to this poll, in the United States that actually want Russia to come out on top. And the one here that really caught my eye is they say, to what extent would you support or oppose the government sending troops into Ukraine? Sending U.S. troops into Ukraine. 22% said they would support that. That's about this. I think the highest I've ever seen that is 25%, but that's still pretty steady in that same ballpark. 22% of Americans say we should send troops to Ukraine. 39% said that we should coordinate airstrikes against Russian targets in Ukraine. I think that we have a little bit of a view that our Air Force is invincible because it's been so long since we've had aircraft shot down in a conventional battlefield. When we look at the aircraft shot down in Iraq and Afghanistan, a lot of times it was just luck. An RPG happened to strike home during a landing kind of thing. I think we've got this view that our aircraft is almost invincible and don't recognize the risks of the very, very real risks of American aircraft being shot down and pilots being killed if they were to be conducting strikes on Russian targets in Ukraine. That's my guess why that 39% is where it is. And then lastly, 49% said that they would support the government conducting cyber attacks against Russian military capabilities. That is an act of war. And I'm trying to explain these things because I genuinely don't think that if you walk down the street, this many Americans are interested in a direct military conflict with Russia. So the way that I would explain this last part here is that people view cyber as not an act of war. And it's tricky because it is, and it can be, and a lot of it determines how the other party receives it, right? So we've been on the receiving end of multiple cyber attacks from Russia, North Korea, Iran, and other state actors around the world. Technically, a handful of those could be viewed as an act of war, but we didn't respond by going to war with those countries. So anyways, 22% supporting troops on the ground, 39% supporting airstrikes against Russia, and 49% supporting cyber attacks against Russian military capabilities. That's a pretty hawkish group of American citizens. I did a lot higher than I would have expected across the board. But that's all I've got for now. Of course, if you're interested in this or other national security subjects, be sure to check out the Substack linked in the description below. We just brought some experts, researchers, analysts, writers on board to start putting out at least 3 articles a week talking about topics adjacent to what I'm discussing in these videos. They're all free. Hopefully you find some value there. But thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.